So as it was taught to me, Honokowai Valley, Hono is bay, ko referred to sugar, and wai is fresh water. So our interpretation is a bay of sweet water. It was the agricultural food production area of Keka'a. Keka'a being a place we call Black Rock, or where the Sheraton and Kanapali is right now. So it was the breadbasket to feed the many villages that exist along that coastline.
That is Ekolu Lindsey, the president of Maui Cultural Lands on Maui. I can't wait for you to hear more from him and about Maui Cultural Lands and how you and your family can get involved during your next trip to Maui. Lots to talk about on this episode of Hawaii's Best. Let's go.
Aloha. Welcome to Hawaii's Best. Here, you'll learn what to know before traveling as we discover Hawaiian culture, local businesses, and the experiences that make Hawaii one of the most incredible places in the world. And now, your host, Bryan Murphy.
Welcome to this episode of Hawaii's Best. Just thank you so much for joining me today. Today is a special episode. It's actually a replay. I'm taking some time the last couple weeks and this week to rest and spend time with family here in the U.S. It is Thanksgiving week. So I just want to say, if you're celebrating Thanksgiving with family, I hope you have a great day, a great week. Many people are off this week, especially those who have school. So hope you have a great week. And actually, I've been really busy working on the blog and writing more content on there. So you can go to hawaiisbesttravel.com and check out some of the latest blog posts that we have up there. We actually have a blog post that we recently wrote about Thanksgiving in Hawaii. So if you are curious about what Thanksgiving is like in Hawaii, you can go ahead and check that out. And I'll link that below in the episode description of this episode. You know, I get a lot of questions and they're great questions about how to volunteer in Hawaii and specifically different islands. And coincidentally, I actually wrote a post about 9 unique ways to volunteer on the island of Kauai. So I'll go ahead and I'll link that as well. But today I want to talk specifically about Maui Cultural Lands. And this is an episode that was released probably about a year and a half ago. And it was with Ekolu Lindsey, who leads the organization Maui Cultural Lands. And this is one of the best ways, if you're visiting Maui, to go ahead and volunteer on the island. We got to experience this with Ekolu and his mom, Huanani. And it was one of those moments that I know myself and my wife will never forget, going down into the Honokowai Valley and removing invasive species and planting trees and learning more about the ecosystem and the importance of water within this valley. And unfortunately, it's pretty dried up. That's a whole other conversation about water usage and rights on the island of Maui, which is a really prevalent conversation right now that's worth looking into, especially on the heels of everything that has happened in Lahaina. And the reason I wanted to reshare this episode was, one, because, like I mentioned, I get a lot of questions about volunteering in Hawaii, and people are traveling back to Maui, and this is a great way to give back through this organization, Maui Cultural Lands. And they actually lost their home, the Lindsey family, in the Lahaina fires, and which is so tragic. I know they're doing tours again, so it's important to go to their website, and I'll link that as well, and just get the up-to-date info about, if you are planning to travel to Maui, to look them up. I've actually had a listener email me and just wanted to thank me about recommending Maui Cultural Lands. So definitely check them out. And I hope that this conversation gives some insight into what volunteering looks like on Maui, and also a little bit about the happenings on Maui as it relates to responsible tourism. And granted, this episode was recorded in kind of a similar time as now, as far as travel to Maui. When the Lahaina fires happened, traveling stop to the island, and then it reopened, and there was a lot of conversations about what reopening looks like, and especially on the west side. This was recorded after the pandemic and after that reopening happened. So there's a lot of similarities to the current climate on Maui. Granted, the current climate now is completely unique to the circumstance of the tragedy in Lahaina. So I just wanted to emphasize that. Anyways, I'm going to stop yakking because I want you to hear this conversation with Ekolu Lindsey on the island of Maui. So let's go ahead and let's talk story. Ekolu, thank you so much for coming on Hawaii's Best. I appreciate you and your time. How are you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful, man. And thank you for having me and giving us this opportunity to share what we do with Maui Cultural Lands and just share with the general public the opportunities that exist here in Maui.
Absolutely. And as those who are listening, I gave a bio of who you are, Maui Cultural Land a little bit, but love to hear just from your own breath, just obviously you're on Maui, who you are, and bring us up to date of where Maui Cultural Lands is today.
Okay, my name is Ekolu Lindsey. My father started Maui Cultural Lands back in 1999. This was just after the sugar industry had closed down on West Maui. And so all the lands became ripe for development and being purchased by developers. So it became a mission of his and a few others to explore the many valleys that exist, and found Honokowai Valley to be one of the most archaeologically rich valleys. So the effort was made there to focus in on the cultural resources and the stories, the history of that space. The intent is to create the awareness for people. What's in their backyards? Why is it there? What story does it tell? And to be inclusive in this. And his grander vision was to include every single valley along West Maui, because as development moves along, these stories, and I hate to use the word story, but lack of a better word, it's not stories, it's a recounting of fact. These stories tend to get lost and it becomes just a space that people live in. But the history of that space is super important, describing the ecology of the area, the cultural identity of the area, what used to be. And it's important to know the history of those spaces, because without the history of the space, we don't know who we are, where we're going. We rely on that so much. So the effort was made to preserve Honokowai Valley through education. My father was a retired teacher, and he loved the outdoor classrooms. Yeah. And, growing up, I was just always envious of him taking his students out on a double hull canoe or hiking Kealalo, the King's Trail, and camping out or doing celestial navigation. They did all this really cool stuff, that people can't really do too much anymore today.
And that stays with you, right? Like that.
Right.
You taste it, you smelled it, you walked the same footsteps.
Right. So, he did that. And this was his outdoor classroom, basically, what it turned out to be.
You talked a little bit about, obviously, when sugar mill came and that production, but what about the history? Because the valley has so much.
The Honokowai Valley, and a lot of people get it confused with Honokohala. It's Honokohala is out past Honolulu Bay. Notice the word Hono 3 times already, right? So Hono is bay. So Honokowai, like any Hawaiian name, place name, the name itself holds the molelo or the history of that place. And it's also always open to interpretation based on who's telling that recounting of fact. So as was taught to me, Honokowai Valley, Hono is bay, ko referred to sugar, and wai or wai is fresh water. So our interpretation is a bay of sweet water. It was the agricultural food production area of Kekaa. Kekaa being a place we call Black Rock, or where the Sheraton and Kanapali is right now. So it was the breadbasket to feed the many villages that exist along that coastline. It was estimated that 600 people kind of lived in that space, but it fed about 6,000 people. It was a very rich agricultural production area. As such, you have a lot of remnant structures that date back to around 1200 AD. And so most of it is loikalo, but there's a heiau and other house structures. It's very, very rich, and it's pretty awesome to see it still intact. Mm-hmm. And my dad passed in 2009, and then realized I'm the haole boy of the family. I didn't realize it was going to drop into my lap. You know, I'm proud of that. I'm like the only one in the family born in California. Because my dad is in the military. My mom was going to school at the time. Sure. And so the Hollywood boy, anyway, dropped into my lap. And I was quite surprised when I was told to take over. But when you're growing up in this environment, you learn a lot of different things, even if you're not paying attention. It's ingrained in you. And I said, man, if I'm going to do this, let's just go for it and go all out. Just learn along the way. And essentially that's what's happened. You know, stay close to my mom, listen to her wealth of knowledge, grab that, did my research, talked to many people, kept sharing it with the many visitors and guests that come. And next thing you know, I'm like 12 years down the line, doing it longer than what my dad was doing. I told my mom that a couple of years, I said, damn, Mom, I've been doing this longer than Dad has. Although my dad was doing it all his life as a teacher, but in Honokowai, you know, you put that into that time perspective, it's pretty incredible.
So maybe some I guess, just super elementary questions. Why is it important to preserve this valley, and talking about reforestation and native species versus invasive? Why is that all important? Why does that matter?
Oh, cool. That's a great question, Brian. Why does it matter? And that's a good question, you know, because when I moved back home to Maui in 2001, I had my son was 3 at the time. So being a busy parent working, he spent his Saturdays with my dad up in the valley. And that's the same question that 4-year-old asked him, Grandpa, why is this important? And he was taken aback by that question because the scientists, the geologists, the botanists, everyone who's come up never asked him that question, let alone try to phrase it into terms that a 4-year-old can understand. So his answer, because that is what we are. That is who we are. That is what we are. Everything is held in that space of our history, our culture, and is the foundation of who we are as Hawaiians, as people. The archaeological sites, the stones, the plants, the botany portion of it. As my grandfather would say, the Hawaiian culture is a simple culture. It is based off of sticks and stones. Food, clothing, transportation, medicine. It's all held with what nature had to offer. So we utilize nature to the best of our ability and used it sustainably, something we aspire to move into in today's world, right? So as simple as it sounds, it is super complex. I mean, I have met people, fishermen, for instance, that look out at the ocean. They'll tell you what fish is spawning, what fish you can catch, the conditions of the ocean, the moon phase it's in, when it's time to plant, when it's time to harvest, all in an instant without even thinking, because it's automatic for these guys. And we don't have them too much anymore. We're relying on apps. Right. We're relying on a moon calendar. But when you run into people who live it and look at it every day, where it's so ingrained in them and it's an instantaneous decision that they make, I'm just amazed. I mean, no, I would aspire to that, but that is a true cultural practitioner. Right now, most of us are still students of it. You know, I'm still a student, always learning, but we can aspire to just make that instantaneous, complex decision in a moment. That is something that we should all aspire to. And that's because they are, these practitioners are tuned in to what nature has to offer. Right. Right.
That's huge. You mentioned Black Rock, and obviously there's large resorts there now. And I think about where Honokowai Valley is located. Is this a protected valley?
Right. So it's not necessarily protected, but we are the stewards.
Gotcha.
We are allowed to be there. So we are the stewards of that space, and we have been there since 1999. We invite anybody who would like to participate in volunteering opportunities with us. You know, we take volunteers up every Saturday. We normally meet at 9:00 and we finish just after lunch. We find work for about 90 minutes, talk story for a little bit, enjoy each other's company, meet new people, learn new things, learn a little bit of culture, history, science, answer any questions. We're not just going to work people.
Yeah.
We want to share together because we also learn from our visitors what they're doing in their part of the world. My dad, what he had created in this was to share cultural values. The center of it all being aloha. Everyone's got their definition of what aloha is. And aloha, like sticks and stones, is simple yet very complex. And if you got the time, I can go into this a little.
Do it. Yeah.
Okay. So my dad, the big scheme of it all is I shouldn't say scheme, it's the wrong word. What he wants to do was to share aloha with the world, right? If we can share aloha with the world, perhaps we can have world peace. That was his high vision of things.
Sure.
So when I recently did a talk story session in a town hall meeting with county council about regenerative tourism, right? What is regenerative tourism? We just came from sustainable tourism, ecotourism, envirotourism, agritourism. There's all these tourism things.
Right.
To me, I'm becoming very cynical about these efforts. Is regenerative tourism another way of allowing more tourists to come here? It's just, we're supposed to leave a lighter footprint. But when you're reaching 3 million visitors a year, how in the world can you leave a lighter footprint? You're using resources. There's user conflict. There's nature conflict, right? So when I asked my aunt, my dad's older sister, she's the hiapo, the elder of the family, what were 5 cultural values that I could share on a regenerative tourism talk? First thing she says to me is, Ekolu, these are not values. These are processes. You need to learn the process before you can practice the value of that process. And right there, I'm like, whoa, a process? I've never heard of that. So I listened. And, when you listen to them, sometimes you just got one shot at it and you better pick things up quickly. So the first process to learn is kupono. Kupono, honesty. Ku, referring to stand upright and tall. Also, pono, to stand in righteousness. So you need to stand upright and tall by speaking the truth. It's something that I don't even think anybody can practice this value properly yet because we're holding stuff back. But there's a way to tell the truth that's not degrading. It has to be a way to build people on their shortcomings. So the first step is have to learn kupono. The second one you needed to learn was malama. Lama was the light, the regeneration of life. To malama, to take care of, that's automatic. Take care of that life. We use the term malama, aina, malama, malama, many different things. Sure. So after kupono and malama, then we learn kokua. Okay. I've always understood kokua as to help without any expectations. Reciprocation because you want to. She just blew my mind when she told me what kokua was. Kua is the backbone, also short for akua or God. And the ko is the long whistle of eternity. Oh, what? Whistle of eternity? I didn't even know eternity had a sound. So I'm listening intently at this point going, oh my God, this is like a process of understanding what kokua is. The long whistle of eternity with a strong backbone. You need helping people. That's automatic. After learning honesty and how to take care of the generation of life. So if you put it in an algebraic equation, right, you have kupono plus malama plus kokua equals aloha, love and compassion, right? So learning aloha, the process of aloha encompasses learning these other processes. Then you can practice that, right? And that was just a short conversation of something that went on for a long time, right? And, I didn't pick it all up, but I got the gist of things. So when we say aloha, my father would also say it's also misunderstood and misused. So we need to understand the true meaning of aloha. I do have another aunt that tells me, Ekolu, aloha was created by the visitors of Malihini so that we would accept them. There's no such thing as aloha. we were a warring people. We fought amongst each other. We fought against our brothers, our fathers, our sisters. So that's another perspective, right? Yeah. But I think aloha, really loving compassion after learning these other processes is super important for all of us to understand as we're moving through a pandemic and watching our visitor counts go up.
Let's jump into that a little bit. This time last year, almost exactly, I think for some reason, August 8th is in my head, or 13th, something like that around this time last year. There was talks of like, it's slowly starting to reopen again after being closed for 4-5 months or so. And here we are sitting in, last I saw, it was higher than 2019 numbers. And any search on Google right now, you just type in Hawaii, you're going to get some interesting articles. One being the Delta variant is skyrocketing right now on all the islands. And also there's articles of what you already alluded to is where's this aloha with travelers, and there's tension, especially it feels like the hotbed, if you will, is East Maui.
Oh, well, you brought up a whole lot of points that we can talk for a long time on, but I'm going to try to keep.
Maybe there's a part two. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so, man. So I'll keep it somewhat brief. Let's start with increasing visitor counts.
Yeah, maybe the reopening and seeing,
It's a reopening, everyone is suffering, but government did step in and people were getting paid. And I think we created some lazy people out there because no one wants to go back to work. If I can get free money and not work, why go back to work? Why even work, right?
Sure.
But, there's something to be said about an honest living, an honest wage, right? So I'm hoping people can jump back into work shortly because I've never heard of restaurants shutting down early. The lines are super long. It's just nuts. Just driving down Front Street. I'm in Lahaina. Driving down Front Street is just so busy. We never expected tourists to come back this quickly during a pandemic, right? We're not prepared for it. We're just not. But, that year that we had off, nature had a respite from people. We saw fish come back. We saw calves come back. We saw more people fishing and more families together. I think that had some time to strengthen that family nucleus as kids couldn't really go back to school. So the families needed to spend time together and recreate themselves, because, I only hear the bad stories. Yeah. I know there are good. You got 10 good stories, one bad story, you're going to hear the bad story, right? So I'm sure there's a lot of good stories out there, but I'm only hearing the not so good ones with conflicts of people being disrespectful and entitled. I mean, if we shared with them aloha, they would understand, and I met some really nice visitors who come and visit with us, volunteer with us as well.
Sure.
So I see the good side of that too, but I'm also seeing the frustration of local people, and they learned over that pandemic. They gave up a lot to be in the visitor industry. We finally got our spaces back. Now we got to share it again, right? I've never seen Kaanapali Beach empty. And then as things opened up a bit, it was all local people with their tents and coolers and kids and everything. It was really nice to see. And now that the chairs and the tents are back up that are for the visitors, there's a little more conflict. We can share the space, but we need to do this respectfully. What does that mean, respectfully? How do we respectfully share that space? Right now, we're just overcrowded. There's just too much. Just a capacity. There's only so many people you can fit into a room before the fire marshal shuts you down.
Maui isn't getting any bigger. And there's also people coming into Maui in particular who aren't aware of some of the culture. And you mentioned something about the reef, and you had to get out there, maybe a little bit of story on that, and then a little bit of education of someone coming to the culture for the first time.
Having gone out to East Maui several times, I work with some of the guys out there working on some conservation action plans and try to restore the ecology, and the marine life, and the terrestrial side as well. Just you got to take care of that whole ahupua'a system. But having gone out there a few times over the last couple of months, there's just too many people on those roads, and working with like 6 different communities on East Maui. The number one thing that comes to the head all the time is people not knowing how to drive that road to East Maui. Everybody wants to take a look at the waterfalls, but you got cars parked on both sides of the roads. Big trucks can't get through. Locals are frustrated. They need to get to work. They need to get home. They can't get past. You had emergency vehicles stuck because they can't get through. So the counties put up some new parking signs and have some enforcement, but it's real difficult to enforce these things out on East Maui because they only have a police force of X amount,
Sure.
and you can't be there all the time, right? So I would like to ask anybody headed to East Maui to just be very aware of their surroundings. Let the local cars pass by, pull over as soon as possible that they can, let them pass by. Don't block the roads. And also the one thing that pops up on East Maui is people are swimming a lot in these streams, right? And what do you do before you go swimming? You put sunscreen on. Okay, now Maui has, we have some new laws in place where you need to use reef-friendly sunscreen. But when you're putting on sunscreen and jumping into the streams, that water's going somewhere. Mm. So if you're around the Kenai area, that water is irrigating the taro that they have. So these guys in Kenai, they're seeing oil slicks come down and watering the taro. What does that do to the food? It makes it taste funny.
Sure.
Right. So, even when you go out in the sun, cover up a little bit.
Right. So like even reef safe or non-reef safe, doesn't regardless of whatever you're putting on your body is slicking off and getting into the taro fields.
Yeah. With everything that's happening, like this morning, I had kayakers on a tour that were stuck on the reef. What are those reefs? It's just rocks. But it's not rocks. There's a live coral that you're stuck on, and they don't know that. So I went out there to help them. Okay, come this way. This is how you walk on the coral. I got them off. They didn't, they had a new guide for this company. So I try to educate the guides, but when you have a high turnover rate, there's a lot of education on my half, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to protect our reefs. What people don't realize is that these reefs protect not only property and people, but they house a lot of fish. It's a whole ecosystem that's established out there. And through the Hawaiian lens, utilizing the Kumulipo, which is our creation chant, line number 15 talks about the first form of life as the coral polyp. That makes corals the foundation of life. If we can't take care of those corals, what will life be like? We won't see the degradation happen in our lifetime, but a couple of generations from now, you're definitely going to see those impacts. So it's super important that we take care of the coral, because if the fish don't have any place to hide or have a house, they're open to predation by other predators. And eventually, we all aspire for food sustainability. But if we can't take care of those corals,
right?
So and we had a monk seal on the reef here too, and people don't know about monk seals, so they want to get up close. Saw a lot on social media. We saw people touching them. Some people think they're dead, so they want to push them back into the water when they're sleeping. So I was talking to my mom this morning, like, whose fault is this that the message is not getting out to the visitors about our cultural resources, the corals, the fish, the dolphins, whales, any turtles, all that. So I kind of came to the realization that I think it's government's fault for not getting this message out on the airplanes.
So that's done like a pre-flight.
Hey,
yeah.
Half an hour before landing, everyone's filling out cards before they get here.
Right.
Well, why not watch this mandatory video about how to enjoy Hawaii respectfully? Simple things go a long way. Hey, learn how to flash the shaka appropriately when somebody lets you in a line when you're driving. Say thank you. It does a lot.
Yeah.
So governments failed because the messaging is not on the airplanes. We failed because it's not at the airports. It's not at the rental car agencies. It's not at the hotels.
So we're kind of on this topic of solutions. If you had a magic wand or whatever, given all the circumstances that are current, what would you see would be an ideal future for Hawaii in regards to tourism?
Tourism is our number one. That's where we get our money from, right? Economically, tourism just ain't going away. People have talked about diversification. Mm-hmm. We've been talking about that for a long time. Diversifying to agriculture is going to take a long time to come back. That was one of the things to diversify into technology sector. That's kind of happening, but it's going to take a long time to happen.
Sure.
If I had that magic wand, really, I think the solution lies in limiting the amount of people that are coming. We have to limit the seats that are coming in, but we can't do it given our current government structure. I look at what Palau has done, our nation of Palau, a small nation. They are leaders in the marine protections and programs that they've come up with. You know, they have this green fee that you pay $30 when you get there and you pay again when you leave, and that all goes towards enforcement. And they're doing wonderful things. So small countries doing things that we cannot because we're just too big. We have too many laws, too many red tape. So they have limited the amount of seats that are coming in. That way they can protect their natural resources. When they have tours, all the people who are snorkeling are on floaties so they can't dive down and touch things, right? So prior to the economic explosion of tourism, Hawaii was a designation for a lifetime trip. You saved up. It was a special place. You dressed up in your best clothes. You took your flight to Hawaii. Yeah. You got off. You got a lay. You went to your hotel and you had a wonderful time. It was a special place. Now we're competing with other markets and things have changed substantially. How do we manage tourism properly?
Right.
I think it sits in the amount of seats. That's what One Magic want to do. Limit the amount of people that would come. Now, whenever you visit someplace, you'd like to think, the cliche, when in Rome, do as the Romans, right? Or in Hawaii, do as the Hawaiians. Share the time, share the spirit, share the love, share the aloha. But you have to understand kupono, malama, kokua in order to figure out aloha, right?
Full circle, yeah.
Right? So with Maui Cultural Lands, these are some of the things we share with our visitors. We share that through malama aina. We share that through honesty. We share that to holding ourselves to a level of integrity that makes people feel like, oh, this is super cool. Or I want to understand more. But more importantly, I think when they take that aloha back with them, wherever they're from, they can share it in their own backyard, but also take a look at the resources that are being utilized in their space. How can they make that better? Mm. What was the indigenous culture that was there before them? I had a lady that asked me, "Ekolu, what does Hawaii mean?" I was like, "Where are you from?" She goes, "I'm from Ohio." What's Ohio mean? I never thought about that. Right. So when I looked it up, a couple of websites, and you have to be mindful of what their resources are. It just said motherland. I'm like, that's not right. It's not motherland. So, it can break it down. Ha, your breath, right. The essence, your ha, right? The vai, fresh water. I didn't get what that last part of E was. So when I finally found it was like a supreme being, mm-hmm. God, right? So as God breathed life into these waters, was my interpretation of that. That's what Hawaii means. So what does Ohio, what does California mean? What was it called before then? What was New York's rivers called? So those are all questions we try to pull out or share with people by sharing what Honokowai is, where'd the water go? What happened to it? What are these structures that are left here? How was it integral into society at that time? So the question can be looked at in their own space and time.
I love that. And I think to kind of wrap up, we haven't touched on it, but you and I and my wife, Ali, when we were on Maui last, and we got to go down in Honokowai Valley, and that experience is something that I still reminisce on. And I'd love to hear a little bit about what people can expect if they, choose to go and volunteer, because we got to experience that. But just from my personal experience, you walk down and you're going to sweat a little bit, and that's part of it, right? And you're going to work. But as you walk down into this valley and hearing, story from you and your mom, there's just this awe and there's this reverence as you walk, trek on this trail, and in planting trees and removing some invasive plants there. You just felt a part of the land. Even we were only there for, 2 hours or whatever, but I just felt this sense of just worth. Like I'm making a difference. Like I'm hanging out at Kanapali and probably had some of the best Mai Tais or whatever. This right here was what Maui, to me, I kind of get a little emotional about it because it was such an incredible experience for myself and Ali. But what can someone expect, coming to volunteer?
Maui Cultural Lands mission really is, stabilize, protect, and restore Hawaiian cultural resources. That's our mission. Simple mission. Stabilize, protect, restore. Those resources include, like I said earlier, the sticks, the stones, but let's put in the people as well, right? So they all have to work together. And when you enter any space, there's always protocol. Protocol is a pretty fancy word for manners, good manners. So we always do protocol upon entering a sacred space. Sacred in this case means super important to us. You know, everyone has their own sacred spaces. So my mom says she's the protocol practitioner. So to hear her voice ring out in the valley, asking permission for all of us to enter and enter safely, sets the foundation for the rest of the day. So as we walk in, you are literally walking in the footsteps of your ancestors, because that's the trail that was utilized to access the valley. And, you know, the work that we do there is simple work. It is hard at times. You know, it's why we only work for about 90 minutes. That seems to be most people's threshold. If people can fathom 90 minutes of work and suffering for a little bit, I ask people to suffer because it makes for a better story when they go home. They're not really suffering too bad. You know, they're a little hot, a little itchy, a couple bug bites. That's about it. But what you get out of it is so much more. The wealth, the feeling of being fulfilled culturally in a culture that you have no knowledge of, but have a glimpse into that is what fills you. That's the lasting impression you leave. But, you know, a lot of people come to Hawaii for the paradise, the fun, the sun, the surf, the hula. You know, you got to do all of that too. And when they're in the Mai Tais, and when you're done with that, come and visit us, so we can really show you what a glimpse into the past is like. So, you know, removing those invasive species along that riparian corridor, stabilizing the Hawaiian biocultural resources, is an important part of maintaining the integrity of that vahipana, or that storied space. Now, that was a whole lot of words and a lot of big stuff. You're going to come, you're going to pull some weeds, and you're going to make it really nice. Right?
Love it.
But there is more meaning to that once you get in. The simple fact of getting those weeds out of the ground puts your mana, your energy into that space as well. And I think this is what people gravitate to. And then they learn about the cultural history of that place, the science and everything else, and the recounting of facts that used to be. The importance of medicinal plants, right? What plant do we use for being itchy? What plants do we use for bug bites? You know, these things all are there for us to learn. People just have to seek it out and go get it, right? So our volunteer days are every Saturday. We start at 9:00 and we finish just after lunch. It's always helpful that people come dressed appropriately. Some people come in shorts and a t-shirt. That's fine. Just be prepared for a little more bites than normal. I like to cover up or wear long pants and a long sleeve shirt. And definitely hat, lots of water for yourselves. Anybody can come and work with us, from 3-4-year-old, as long as they can understand the words of "do not throw that rock." That's cool, no problem. We love to have those kids working with us. And as long as you're physically able to walk down a trail, it takes like 6 minutes to get down there, but you got to walk back up. It might take 12. As long as you're a little physically able, we welcome anybody who wants to participate.
And how can people get connected with you, find you guys?
Check out our website, mauiculturallands.org. Emails come directly to me. I'll send you confirmation letters, what to expect. A couple of links on YouTube to take a look at to help identify will help you understand where you're going to go, what you're going to do. And that should answer most of your questions that way. But in the end, just kind of go with the flow, have a little fun, figure it out as we go. Suffer a little, it might get a little itchy. Well, we got medicine for that stuff. We got Hawaiian medicinal plants. In the end, share the aloha, share the love and compassion for each other, for the land, the space you exist in, but also, take that home and share it with your families.
Yeah. The
2 goals I have when visitors come with me, any visitor, I always have 2 goals, sometimes 3, but I'll stick with 2. First goal I have for everybody, have fun. Gotta have fun. If you're not having fun, that's your fault. And the second goal I have, learn one thing in the realm of culture, history, and science. If we can have fun, and learn one thing: a successful day. You walk away smiling, feeling good, and your Mai Tai tastes good after that too.
Even sweeter, yeah.
Yeah.
One thing I love to just ask at the end of every episode is, if someone's traveling to the islands for the very first time, maybe just talking about, let's talk about food. It always goes back to food. What is a spot on Maui that you would recommend someone trying?
Oh, well, let's just say they're all good. Try a lunch wagon, try a restaurant,
there you go.
Expand your horizons, try something you've never tried before. And if you didn't like it, try it again to make sure you didn't like it. Expand your taste buds, and, don't be afraid to try different things. Like when people come with us, sometimes we'll have a little bit of ulu for them. That's breadfruit to try. Or we might have some taro for them to try, or some poi to try. Try poi, but eat it the way it's supposed to be eaten. Eat it with some raw fish, some dried fish, something salty, because that poi tastes ono when you eat it properly. Now, if you just eat it by itself, and it's the kind that's watered down, it doesn't taste like very much, but try the Hawaiian cuisines, the Hawaiian foods, so you get the taste for the palate that existed here. I asked one person, Uncle Mac, poi on Molokai, Uncle Mac, what's your secret to long life? I always kid with him. He goes, "Kolu, raw fish and poi."
Like, just hands down. Yeah.
Hands down, raw fish and poi. That's the secret to long life. You got to eat that stuff. But the simple answer is super complex, because you got to go catch the fish. You got to know what fish you want,
right.
What tastes good, how to cook it, and all the other details with that fish, not to mention cleaning, cutting, burping, and all that stuff.
Well, good. Ekolu, I truly appreciate you. Thank you.
All right. Well, Bryan, thank you for the time. And I hope that this helps visitors to kind of check a few things out, learn some of the local customs, just basically respect. When you come into Hawaii, treat it like your grandmother's house. Always ask permission to enter. Leave it nicer than when you got there. Even if it's not your trash, hey, pick it up, put it in a rubbish can, and take it with you. I really appreciate people who can do that,
Yeah.
And that's not just for the tourists, it's for everybody to participate in. Simple, respectful things go a long way. Share that aloha, share a smile, say thank you. Don't think I'm trying to get something out of you just because I smiled and said aloha to you, right? And I get that, going to other countries, sometimes there's a hard sale a lot of times, so they want something. No, we don't want anything. We just want to share the aloha with you. And if people can break through these bubbles of me, my, and I, and use we and us, and be encompassing of each other, and sharing the honesty, and the generation of life, and helping each other, I think we can create a better world for our grandchildren. I do all this work, not for me, for my son, and those who are not even here yet.
Yeah.
And a lot of us do that, not for us, not the present, for the future. Well, of course, we want to make the present better, but really the work is for the future.
Right.
So thank you, Bryan, for having me on. I appreciate the time you've given me and the opportunity to share some simple thoughts.
Absolutely. Thank you. And aloha.
Aloha, Bryan.
I just want to thank Ekolu again for his time. And if you're interested in volunteering at Maui Cultural Lands, go to mauiculturallands.org, and you can connect with Ekolu there and find out more information about when and how to volunteer. Typically every Saturday they work on the land, and you get to learn some of the culture, values, and history of that place. And like I mentioned briefly in the episode, my wife and I, we got to experience this. It was an incredible experience, and I want that for all of you. So consider that. If you're not planning on traveling to Maui, there's other resources out there to consider. One of them is travel2change.org. That's travel2change.org. And you'll be able to find some resources over there too. But again, thank you so much for making it this far into the episode. And if you have, want to encourage you to leave a honest rating and review. That just helps other people who love Hawaii and can't wait to give back to the islands as much as you. So until next time, friends, which is going to be tomorrow. If you're listening to this on Thursday, we're going to release another episode tomorrow on Friday talking about May Day, with our unofficial cultural practitioner, Kahanui Solatorio. So stay tuned for that. Subscribe, be well. And until then, aloha.
Mahalo for listening to this episode of Hawaii's Best. If you are enjoying the podcast, please take a moment to leave a review on Apple and a rating on Spotify. To stay up to date on future episodes, please subscribe and visit us at hawaiisbesttravel.com. Until next time, ahui ho.